Healthy Cooking Demo. My name is Colette Phipps. I'm with the Westchester County Department of Senior Programs and Services, and I bring greetings from May Carpenter, our commissioner, and our county exec, George Latimer. So you are in for a very exciting day because we're cooking with Daryl Moss, and I know personally that her food is outstanding. So please enjoy the morning. You've got to try the soup. I'm sure that you're going to enjoy it and have a great time cooking with Daryl. I hand it over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Colette. Hello, my name is Jennifer Crawford, and I'm a program specialist in the Livable Communities Unit of the Westchester County Department of Senior Programs and Services. I'm thrilled that we're able to present today's age-friendly healthy cooking demo. I'd like to thank our age-friendly collaborative and our extraordinary co-chairs, Deb Castle and Louise Chalop. Today's presenter, Daryl Moss, is a certified holistic health coach and has been in practice for 13 years. She takes a functional medicine approach to her work, understanding that everything in the body is interconnected. Although Daryl puts a major emphasis on nutrition, lifestyle modifications are also integral to her work.
Increased number of AAAs and other organizations that can provide caregiver-directed respite and an increase in caregivers receiving services and more flexibility to provide respite.
Sorry about that. Let me continue. Today's presenter, Daryl Moss, is a certified holistic health coach and has been in practice for 13 years. She takes a functional medicine approach to her work, understanding that everything in the body is interconnected. Although Daryl puts a major emphasis on nutrition, lifestyle modifications are also integral to her work. Daryl's private practice is Mission to Wellness, where she develops customized plans for each client to help them get their bodies back to a state of balance. Daryl also runs virtual group programs with two of her colleagues at the Synergy 3. She also contributes to several local publications and is an active volunteer in the community. Her newsletter features information about food, nutrition, the environment, and gluten-free recipes. For a free subscription, feel free to contact Daryl at daryl@missiontowellness.com, and I will provide her email in the chat. We'll have Q&A after the cooking demo. At that time, we'll ask you to unmute yourself to ask a question. You can raise your hand, or you can feel free to put your question in the chat. With that, now on to the food. Daryl, let me unmute you.
Sorry. Thank you, Jennifer. Sorry, I had to unmute. Welcome everybody to today's cooking demo. I would love to, again, to thank Colette and Jennifer for inviting me to lead this program today and for the warm introduction. I'm so happy to be here. Today we're making lentil soup, and I'm going to demonstrate more than one way to cover some of the steps, and what a perfect day on a snowy morning to be making a warming soup. So I'm a firm believer that our meals should be delicious and nutritious and should be full of immune boosting nutrients. And with the surge of COVID-19 on top of the cold and flu season, now more than ever, we really need to be eating nutritious foods. And I personally include these nutrients in as many meals as possible, and I hope you guys do too. So this is the lineup. We're going to be making lentil soup, so we're going to be using carrots, celery, onions, garlic, broth, some different greens, and lentils, which I was just soaking. They're ready to go. They're by the pot.
Lentils.
And I'd like to have everything ready to go before I start cooking. So this is called mise en place, which in French means putting everything in its place. So we're going to start cooking now. And before I start chopping, the first thing I want to do is turn on the soup pot so that it's warm when we're ready to put in the ingredients. And I like to cook with a stainless steel soup pan because number one, there are no minerals, toxic minerals that are going to seep out into the food. And number two, it heats up really evenly, so it's a great surface to cook with. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do with making the soup is to chop the vegetables because they're going to get sauteed first. So one thing I want to say is I don't believe in perfection. I believe in making things easy. So if you don't want to chop everything, the celery, the onions, and carrots, you can buy pre-chopped vegetables, which is the celery, the onions, and the carrots. And this is called mirepoix. And you can get this at almost any grocery store, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, etc. So we could chop by hand, which takes time and effort, and we could accidentally cut ourselves. And with the celery, it's a lot more cuts and a lot more chopping. Or we could cut just big chunks and put it in the food processor, and it cooks and chops really, really quickly. So I know that a lot of us are really busy, and a lot of us don't want to spend a lot of time chopping. We want to get to the good part, which is eating our food. So I'm going to show you how quickly and easily we can do this in the food processor. And I do the carrots and the celery together, and then I'll do the onions separately. But it only just takes a couple of seconds. Whoops. And it's just so easy to do. And ease is important. So here we go. We're going to put everything in here. On the top. Sorry about the noise. And there we go, it's all chopped. So we actually can do it another second more. Get the carrots a little bit smaller. But there's no way I could have chopped it all so quickly. So that's so easy to do. And again, I think it's important to understand that nobody has to be perfect in the kitchen, and it will taste just as good chopping it in the food chopper, or if you want to just buy it already chopped, as if you were chopping it by hand. There we go. I have to clear it completely out because we're going to put the onions in, and it's all going to get cooked together. So with the onions, if you wanted to dice it almost perfectly by hand, I do it as if I cut the onion as if it were a piece of graph paper. So I cut vertically, and then I cut horizontally. But again, this can take time, and it can cause your eyes to start watering. And then you cut it, and it comes out in lots of little pieces. Or we can just put the whole thing in the food processor and do it much quicker, and no need to be wiping your eyes. When my kids were little, they would tease me with the cooking and give me their swimming goggles to wear so I didn't cry when I was cutting the onions. So you can see that's a lot easier to do. And if you want the pieces smaller, you can chop it a little bit longer. Okay, so these are the first three things that are going in the pot. Just rinse my hands for a second. Okay, so the pan is hot. We just need a little bit of olive oil to prevent everything from sticking on the bottom. So I'm just going to put in about a tablespoon. And we want to wait, because this is not a nonstick pan. The way nonstick pans work the best is you want to heat the pan up first. And when the pan is hot, then you add the olive oil, or depending on what you're cooking with, butter or whatever. Swirl it around so you coat the bottom. You want to wait a second for that to heat up. And when that heats up, then you put in the ingredients. The same thing goes if you have a stainless steel small saute pan and you're making eggs for breakfast. You want to heat the pan first, and then you heat the oil or the butter. And then when that's hot, then you put in your eggs. And we can use the rest of those onions that we chopped. Sink. Okay, so here we we go. This all goes in, and you can hear it sizzling, so you know the pan is hot. Okay, so I'm gonna shake it around so it pretty evenly covers the bottom. And we're gonna cook this for about 5 minutes. Put it on a low to medium heat. And while that's cooking, the next thing that goes in is gonna be the garlic. So I have a mini chopper that I like to use to chop garlic. It handles it better than the big food processor. You can certainly chop it by hand. So this isn't peeled yet. I took it off the clove. If you just press down, and then you cut the ends off, the skin peels off very, very easily. And then you can just cut it in half and put it in the chopper. You can certainly mince it by hand if you want, but it takes a lot longer and your hands are gonna get a lot more garlicky smell. You can certainly wipe your hands with lemon if that happens. But I love this mini chopper. I use this to make my own salad dressing almost every day. I throw in the garlic and the mustard and the oil and vinegar and whatever else I'm using, and it's just so easy. So again, this is going to go, and it's done. So that's ready to go. It's good to actually cut the garlic and the garlic and the onions a little bit before you're going to use them, because the interaction with the air activates some of the nutrients that are such important parts of our immune boosting system. Garlic is especially effective against colds and flus and viruses, other viruses. So I like to cook with garlic as much as possible. So if you eat garlic, I encourage you to be generous with it. This recipe today, I'm keeping the spices sort of to a minimum because I don't know what everybody's taste level is. But in your own home, if you like more garlic, use it. If you like less garlic, you can use something else. You know, feel free to be flexible. And if you don't want to chop garlic, you can use garlic powder. There's nothing wrong with it. Your food will still be delicious. So again, this is not about perfection. It's about finding what works for you and how you can get the best exposure to as many nutrients as possible in your kitchen. So one of the things I mentioned is about you could purchase mirepoix instead of chopping your carrots and your celery and your onions. The same thing goes if you, for example, if you like butternut squash soup. That's one of my favorite soups to have in the wintertime. And butternut squash is a hard squash. It's not like zucchini. So it's tough to peel and it's tough to chop. So you can buy bags of already chopped butternut squash in the store, either fresh or frozen. And it makes your soup so much easier to prepare. Or if you're roasting it, same thing, it's just so much easier. And it's just as nutritious. The one thing that you need to be mindful of if you're buying pre-chopped food is it doesn't last as long in your refrigerator as the whole carrots or the whole squash or the whole celery, etc. So keep that in mind. And same thing if you're making zucchini noodles, you don't have to spiralize them yourself. You can buy them already made, already spiralized in the refrigerator section at your grocery store. So feel free to be open-minded and experiment with all those things. So let's see how this is doing. You can see everything is softening up. So let's give it a little mix before we add the other ingredients. So these are the lentils that we're going to be using today. These are brown lentils, and I've already rinsed them off. One of the things I love about cooking with lentils is that you don't need to soak them overnight. They cook and they don't take long to cook. So I already went through them to make sure there are no pebbles in here, and I rinsed them off right before we got on the Zoom. And then we're also going to be using organic diced tomatoes. Now these are from a non-BPA lined can. BPA is an endocrine disruptor chemical that many, many companies use to line their cans. So I'm a really big proponent of keeping as many chemicals out of my life as possible. That's why I like to cook with stainless steel. I like to eat organic food. And if you buy canned goods, you want to make sure they're in BPA-free cans. There are several brands that use only BPA-free cans. I think most of the cans at Trader Joe's and at Whole Foods are also BPA-free. And then we're also going to be adding vegetable broth. So you can certainly make your own. And if you just need a pretty strong blender that can do that, and a blender that can handle really hot water. But if you don't have time, you can buy it already made, and it's going to be just as delicious, and it's very nutritious. And again, you can see this is organic. And I'm always, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I'm always a big proponent of organic foods. Okay, so we're just about ready to put in the other ingredients. I'm gonna put this in a minute. So I have the spices in place. We're using some cumin, we're using some thyme. This is actually from my garden that I dried, and a bay leaf. And just make sure when you're finished making the soup, you remove the bay leaf because it's there for flavor, not to eat. So we'll start off adding the tomatoes. This is a pop-up can, so it's so easy to use. And we're going to add 2 cups of water. And this is 4 cups of broth that we're going to add as well. Before I do that, I apologize. I meant to put the garlic in first. It will still be fine. But when you do this at home, put the garlic in before you put the other ingredients. I jumped the gun here. I apologize. Okay. So I'll put in the rest of the broth. And what we're going to do is after we add all of these ingredients, we're going to bring the soup to a boil, and we're going to let it cook. And then we're going to cover it and bring the heat down to a simmer and let it cook for 30 minutes. Right, so I'm going to put in the thyme. I'm going to put in the cumin. I'm going to put in the bay leaf. Put in the lentils. I'm going to put in some salt and pepper. So salt is always optional. Everybody has different dietary needs and health situations. So I recommend either using Himalayan sea salt or using kosher salt. So I love Himalayan sea salt because it also has some other minerals in it. So I'll give it a shake. I always recommend going light on the salt when you're cooking because you can when you're finished preparing the food, whether it's soup or anything else, you can taste it and you can add more seasoning if you need it, but you can't take it out if you put too much in, obviously ahead of time. I'll put in some freshly ground pepper as well. And now we're going to turn the heat up and we're going to bring this to a hearty boil. So we'll give it a stir. Now you might be wondering why I'm using such a big pot when I'm not making that much soup. So one of the reasons I like to do this is that number one, the vegetables get softer quicker because there's more surface area being exposed. And it's easier to mix everything in a big pot. So while we're waiting for this soup to boil, I thought I would just talk about a couple other things. One of the things I think is really important to understand is that there's no one right way to eat. It can be really confusing when you open up a magazine devoted to food or the Tuesday section of the paper that's talking about different diets, because they all sound amazing, but there's really no one right way to eat. We're all different. We have different levels of activity. We have different genetics. We have different blood types. We might have different risk of disease. So whatever diet modality works for you, whether you eat meat or not, whether you're paleo or keto, vegetarian, whatever, you want to be eating whole foods as much as possible. So a whole food is a food that's as close to its original form as you can eat. So if you eat wheat, for example, you're not going to go to the farm and pick it, but you want to eat minimally processed. But everything we're using today is a whole food. We use real carrots, real celery, real garlic, real onions, real lentils, etc. And so whole foods have as many of the original nutrients in them, and it's the combination of all those nutrients in the food that give us the benefit of those foods. So again, whatever diet you're eating, it's really important to stick with a whole food diet. So this is getting hot. It's not quite boiling yet, so I'm not going to cover it quite yet. And again, with lentils, they are a complete source of protein. And for so many people, especially if they are vegan or vegetarian, or even if they're not, but they're eating a primarily plant-based diet, it's hard to get enough protein in the day. And lentils are such an easy way, and they're so versatile to cook with. So they're such a great ingredient to use in your kitchen. So the other vegetables that we're using today are incredibly nutritious. They're high in vitamin A and vitamin C in particular, which are incredibly important to boosting our immune systems. And again, we are being bombarded with COVID-19 and hopefully not as much cold and flu this year because people aren't going out as much, but it's still that time of the year and it's that season. They're also high, these vegetables are also really high in vitamins and minerals that are very important to our immune health. They're antioxidants. They have a lot of polyphenols and phytonutrients in them. And those are the chemicals that work together synergistically to give our bodies such a boost. And this is also a very, very stressful time of our lives, living through a pandemic. And stress really wreaks havoc on our entire systems, from our brains to our muscles, down, really literally down to the cellular level. And eating foods that are antioxidants and that are whole foods really help to mitigate that. So I encourage you, whatever the food that you're cooking, and I hope you try to make this soup at home, but whatever you're making, that you do use whole food ingredients and you try to boost your nutrients through your meals. So you can see that the little bubbles are forming along the sides of the soup. So this is about to become a rip-roaring boil. So we can cover this up. I'm going to get one more second. I'll cover it up in a second. I'll show you the big boil, and then we'll get going. One of the reasons I really like to eat organic foods is that, as I mentioned, I'm very worried about toxic exposure. So if you're new to eating organic foods, a great way to start is to go to the Environmental Working Group's website, and their web address is ewg.org. Jennifer, maybe you can put that in the chat. It's ewg.org. And they are a nonprofit. The Environmental Working Group is a nonprofit, and they rate the chemical residue of things once it's peeled or chopped, if it's food, or if it's not a food, they measure it in personal care products, cleaning products, toys, sunscreens, etc. But with food, they have two lists, which are a terrific guide to use. And you can download them and keep them by your phone if you're ordering your food, or by your computer if you're ordering your food that way, or put it in your wallet if you bring it if you go to the market yourself. So their two lists are the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. The Dirty Dozen are the foods that retain the most chemical exposure from the pesticides, insecticides, et cetera, that were used on them after you wash and or peel them. So if you're going to pick and choose where you're going to spend your money on organic food, those foods are the ones that are most important. The foods that are on the Clean 15 list are the ones that are not as important to buy organic in terms of chemical residue. So they're not talking about chemical runoff in the water supply or carbon footprint or any other really valid issues. They're just talking about what's left after you wash or peel the food. Okay, so this is starting to boil. You can see on the sides. So we're going to give it one more stir. And thank you. I want to thank my daughter, Haley, for operating the camera today. We're going to cook this for about 30 minutes, and we're going to turn it down while it cooks. Okay. So what I did for you guys, just put this in the sink, is I made another partially yesterday so that I could show you the end of the cooking process, because we don't have time to cook the whole soup today. So I made one yesterday and I'm going to finish it with you today. We're going to add some dark leafy greens. Today we're going to use arugula. Sorry about that. Thank you, Haley. I like to use arugula because it has a little bit of a peppery flavor, so it just adds a little more zip to the soup. But you could use kale, you could use Swiss chard, you could use mustard greens, you could use spinach, whatever it is that you like or you have in the house. But today we're going to be using the arugula, as I said. I rinsed it out before we started. And we're also going to squeeze some fresh lemon juice in as well. So lemon is really high in vitamin C. It's also great for your digestive system. It's great for your nails, for your hair, for your skin. It's wonderful to sort of get things going in the morning. I always drink a glass of lemon water first thing. And you could either drink that at room temperature or you can heat the water up. So I turned this on earlier. I'm going to give this a stir. So this is what this soup will look like after it's been cooking for half an hour. So I'm going to turn it up. And as it gets hot, we'll add the other food. Into it. One of the things I also wanted to mention about adding the tomatoes to your soup is that tomatoes, aside from being high in the vitamins that it's high in, it's also very high in lutein. So if you have any eye issues or you are at risk for macular degeneration, which a lot of us are, lutein is a very, very important nutrient to have in your daily regimen. So I love using tomatoes for that reason. So we're going to be adding the dark leafy greens. Dark leafy greens are a really important component of everybody's diet. So I do think that people should eat as close as possible to the colors of the rainbow every day. So we're going to have yellow from the lemons. We have greens from the arugula. We have greens from the celery. We have orange from the carrots. We have white from the onions and garlic. So we're doing a good job here just in one meal. But dark leafy greens should outweigh all of the other colors. So I use greens in my smoothie in the morning. If I don't have a smoothie, I scramble eggs with greens in them. Greens are full of so many more nutrients than most of the other colored foods. So I really encourage you to eat them as much as possible. And then on top of the soup, when we're done, I like to have a little garnish. So I'm going to be using cilantro. And cilantro, again, like everything else, we can chop it by hand or we can put it in the mini chopper and it will chop really quickly. Cilantro is a great detoxifier. So it gloms onto toxins in your body and helps you excrete them. But cilantro is one of those foods that people either love or hate. There are not that many people who are neutral on cilantro. So if you don't like cilantro and you do want to have a pretty green garnish, I would suggest that you use some parsley instead. So again, we can chop it by hand, which can be a pain in the neck to do because you want to get it in little tiny pieces as a garnish, or we can put it in the mini chopper. And it's okay that it has the garlic flavor because there's garlic in the soup anyway. And we'll chop really, really, really quickly. And there we go. That is so much easier than doing it by hand. We'll put it on a little plate to have as a garnish. How's the cilantro, Haley?
It's good.
It's good?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's great.
And this is one of my favorite little tools to have in the kitchen. And this is for squeezing the lemon into the soup or into whatever you're using. So we'll just put the lemon in like this. It will hold the seeds in the bottom here, and we're just going to squeeze it. So let's go over to the soup. I'm going to bring it up to the front so it's easier to see. So the greens are going to wilt really, really quickly in the soup. It's easier in the bigger pot. I didn't have 2 big pots to use today, but you'll see how quickly the greens will wilt. So when you're using greens, you have the choice of with some of the greens, like the more hardy leaves, like spinach and kale, you have a choice of the baby greens, which are going to cook much quicker and are softer, or the full leaf, which is more mature. And they have slightly different flavors. The baby greens tend to be sweeter than the full leaf version. So for example, in cooking eggs or putting in soup, it doesn't really matter to me that, you know, which one I use. I'm looking more for the kind of green that I care about. But if I'm making a smoothie, then I want this sweeter form. So I'll use the baby kale or the baby spinach. And you can see this has only been in for about a minute, and it's already almost completely wilted. Okay, and so this is my lemon squeezer. So you can see you put it in, actually, it looks like it would fit in this way, but you want to put it in upside down. And you squeeze it together. And there you go. No mess and no seeds, because the seeds stay in the bottom. Can you see that? They stay in the bottom. We can give it one extra squeeze, a little more juice. So I love the lemon because it just gives it a little bit of extra flavor. And I love that kick. And it's so good for you. So again, there's so many foods that are delicious, that are so nutritious. And I encourage you as much as possible to add as many of them into your day as you can. So let's just let the flavors meld together. So I want to make sure I cover everything I want to cover with you guys before we have the soup. One other thing I wanted to mention is that the carrots I used today, I didn't peel because I was using organic carrots. So a lot of fruits and vegetables, I'd say most fruits and vegetables have very, very healthy peels, because the plant uses their peel as a defense mechanism. And so that's where a lot of the nutrients are. The problem is we don't eat all the peels. But with carrots, you certainly can eat the peel. And same thing with parsnips or potatoes or sweet potatoes or yams, as long as they're organic. So I scrubbed them really well to get the dirt off before we started cooking, but I left the peel on. So that's another thing that makes the cooking easier, is not having to peel your vegetables. But again, you want to make, that only goes if you're using the organically grown fruits and vegetables. So if you go to if the choice for you is whether or not to eat a conventionally grown carrot or no carrot, go for the conventionally grown. You're still going to get some nutrition out of it. If you have the choice of both, then I would certainly go for the organic form. So you can see this is boiling again. So to serve it, I'll ladle some in. And we'll put on a sprinkle of cilantro. And how yummy does this look? So delicious. One of my favorite things to have. So we'll turn that heat off. So again, If you're using organic potatoes, you don't need to peel. If you're making mashed potatoes, for example, you don't need to peel them. Same with organic sweet potatoes or yams. You want to get as many nutrients in your body as possible, because that's what's fortifying our immune systems. One of the other things I wanted to mention is that when it comes to eating healthy fruits and vegetables, the shorter the time between picking the food at the farm and eating it, the more nutrients remain in the food. So in the summertime, living up here in New York, where most of us live, I think, we have a huge selection of locally grown food from probably July through October. But the rest of the year, there's very little available that's locally grown. So sometimes we have a choice of buying berries that are grown in another country where it's summer right now, or frozen berries that we can get in the freezer section. The frozen berries are going to actually be more nutritious than the fresh ones, because most of the farms now, with their freezing things, they pick them, they clean them, and they freeze them right away, and they retain almost the full nutrient complement. But if you're eating berries that are grown in another country where it's summer right now, they get picked most likely before they're ripe, so that they don't rot on the way here. They get stuck in a warehouse and they get shipped to New York, and they go to another warehouse before they go to your grocery store. So that's more than a few days. So they're not going to have nearly the same nutritional punch. So I would encourage you to be mindful when you go to the store, not to be worried about buying frozen vegetables. And plus, with the weather like this, we want to stock up with food in our freezers so that we don't have to go out in the snow. It's great to have that stuff available. So I'm going to open this up to questions in a minute. I just wanted to mention that a lot of people also think that organic produce is much more expensive than conventionally grown foods. And sometimes that's the case, but it's not always the case. And because there's much more demand, a lot more farms are now using organic growing practices. And organic food is really widely available. Every supermarket has a selection of organically grown foods, as does Trader Joe's. Whole Foods obviously does as well. And the big box stores like BJ's and Costco do too. And when you're looking at food on the shelf, sometimes people pick up something and they put it back in the wrong bin. Most organic vegetables and fruits have a 5-digit number that begins with the number 9 on the apple or on the lemon or whatever. I should have, I don't think there's a sticker on the lemon. But most conventionally grown foods have a 4-digit number. So keep that in mind when you're doing your shopping. And again, this is what it looks like when it's done. And I'll show you the broth that's still cooking. It hasn't been in here yet for half an hour.
Smells good.
But, oh, thank you, Haley. I'm glad you so I want to thank my camera lady, Haley, my daughter. And I want to thank you guys all for tuning in today. And I would love to be able to answer some of your questions. So feel free to unmute yourself. And Jennifer, are you going to call on people or?
Sure. You can any way you want. So you can unmute yourself, ask a question. You can raise your hand or you can put it in the chat. What I'll do too, Daryl, while you're answering questions is I'll just share my screen to show your recipe and your contact information, which is also in the chat as well. I can kick off the questions with one. It was from Colette. She asked if you had soaked the lentils before you began cooking. Were the lentils soaked for a period of time? And if so, how much time?
That's a great question. So one of the reasons I love cooking with lentils is you don't really have to soak them. So what I do is I measure out. So we used a cup of lentils today. I measured them out. I put it in a colander just like this one, a little strainer. I picked through to make sure there are no pebbles in there, because sometimes there are pebbles mixed in with lentils. And then all I do is I rinse them for a few minutes. It's not like cooking with with like black beans or kidney beans or something where you need to soak them overnight. Lentils are so easy and they cook in 20 to 30 minutes.
Hey, hi, I have a question.
Hi.
Hi, it's Louise Chalip. How are you?
Hi, Louise.
Hi. We go back to my previous life, right? At
You
Chester.
do. That's my daughter, Haley, who
Yes,
you must remember.
exactly. Hi, Haley. It's nice
Hi.
to have another Schechter LaFell connection. I have a question about cumin. Cumin.
Yes.
I don't do well with a lot of these Middle Eastern spices. I certainly can't use cilantro. That you gave a substitution for. Is there a substitution for cumin, or do we just leave it out?
So that's a really good question. So it's interesting. I love those. I love cumin and turmeric because they're really strong anti-inflammatory spices. If you don't like them or you don't do well with them, take them out, and you can certainly go. You can use your favorite spices. So you could go more with tarragon or rosemary or basil, whatever works for you. It's going to change obviously the flavor of the soup or any food, but it's important that people eat what they like, not what they don't like. So I chose the recipe, so I chose what I like, Louise. But you know, go with what works for you.
Okay, thank you. This has been great.
Oh,
I have a question.
Louise, before the next question, I just want to mention one other thing. So when you're choosing your spices as well in the grocery store, you want to make sure that they're pretty fresh, you know, check the label, and you want to make sure if you have an organic option, I would go with the organic option as well. Next, I'm sorry, somebody else had a question?
It's me, Deb.
Hi.
Hi, Daryl. So I love cooking with olive oil. I've always cooked with olive oil. And now I'm reading things about like olive oil isn't really, you shouldn't heat it up too much. It's not good for you if it's heated up too much. And I can't get used to using like avocado oil instead, or like coconut oil for certain things. Like I definitely would want to put and do use olive oil to saute my mirepoix for a recipe like this. What's your understanding of heating up olive oil?
So it's interesting. That's a great question. And the research tends to change every few years on different oils. Before I answer your question, I just want to emphasize that this country's been on a low fat and low oil kick for a very long time, which I think has been misguided. We need to have, almost all of us need to have healthy oils and healthy fats in our diet, just not at a large amount, because our hair, our skin, our nails, and our brain all need, our cellular membranes, they all need healthy fats. Different oils have different tastes and different consistencies. For heating at really high heat, like if I'm roasting vegetables in the oven, I like to use, if I'm going at really high heat, I do like to use either avocado oil or coconut oil. If I'm making eggs or I'm making soup, I mostly sauteed everything at a pretty low, like a low to medium flame, so it wasn't really hot. I only turned it up briefly to bring it to a boil. But in general, if you're working at a high temperature, olive oil is not the best way to go. If you're doing it once in a while, you don't want to drive yourself crazy. I believe in moderation. But if you're cooking a lot of things at a high temperature, then I would try some of the other oils. So the coconut oil, you know, as I said, I like to cook a lot with South Asian spices. Number one, I love the flavor. Number two, they're really strong anti-inflammatory. They have strong anti-inflammatory properties. So I don't mind having a slight coconut flavor to my butternut squash soup, for example. I didn't use it for this because I don't think it really goes with it.
I agree. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a few questions from the chat. Do you ever use an Instant Pot? What effect does it have on the nutritional content of the food?
That is a great question. So we just bought our first Instant Pot. It's my favorite toy. We bought it on Amazon Prime Day and I love it. I didn't use it today because most people don't have one, but it doesn't take away the any nutritional component from the food at all. You can cook your dinners or any meal so much faster, and I love it. It's amazing. And it had the one that we bought, just to go back to the previous question, has an air fryer lid. So we can cook food with a minimal amount of any oil on it in the air fryer. But I've made I've made some soups in there. They've been delicious. I roast chicken in the Instant Pot, and it cooks in 30% less time. I love it. It's so easy.
And then, can you freeze the soup? And do you have any tips on freezing soups in general?
Great. You guys are asking great questions. So
I don't know why.
So when I make,
I have a question.
Nanny, wait till after this question is over, please. Thank you. That's my grandmother.
No, I'm sorry. I thought it was answered already. I apologize.
No, there was another question. Continue, Mom.
okay, we've got the
I'm sorry.
3 generations. So whenever I make soup, and I would encourage this for everybody, make as big a pot of soup as you can make, because soup freezes really well. So when I freeze soup, I wait till it's completely cooled before I remove it from the pot. And you can freeze either in plastic containers or in glass containers. If you freeze in glass, you need to make sure that the glass can hold up in the freezer. So you need to be very, very careful. I've made that mistake, because if it's not the right kind of glass, it's going to crack when the soup expands when it freezes. So if you're not sure, don't use it, but you can certainly buy mason jars that are made for the freezer. And you do not want to fill them up to the top. If you freeze in a plastic container, I cannot emphasize how important it is to let the soup cool completely before you put it in the plastic, because the chemicals from the plastic can leach into the soup. And then if you're defrosting from a plastic container, you want to leave it in the refrigerator so that it slowly starts to defrost, and then you can shake the container into a smaller pot and heat it up that way. You never want to reheat something in a plastic container in the microwave. So I hope that answers your question. Sally, you had a question?
Yeah, you answered number 1 question about freezing. The next question is, since it takes a lot of work, if I want to make a big pot, do you actually double everything or not?
If I'm making a bigger amount, I double it. And if you don't want to do the work, buy the near pot. It's already chopped up. So I weighed the carrot. This is about a pound. This is a little bit under a pound, this particular container. I weighed the onions, carrots, and celery before we started cooking today to make sure it was about the same weight. So it was 1-to-1. So if you buy a container that's about 14 to 16 ounces, depending on the size of your carrots, your celery, and your medium-sized onion, it's going to be about the same amount. And again, there's no chopping. Just do this. And some people with garlic, either they use garlic powder if they don't want to chop it, or they can buy, I don't do this, but I know plenty of people buy the garlic already chopped in a jar. Again, in the produce, probably in the refrigerator part of the produce section of your supermarket. And again, and if you don't want to make your own broth, buy the store-bought. So you can make this soup really, really quickly, because if I weren't stopping to explain every step, we could have done it, we would have made it in a shorter period of time. So it's an easy thing to do. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Anybody else? Is that it?
Are there other questions?
No. Looks like everyone got it.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. I want to mention one other thing, since there are no other questions, since we have a couple minutes. When you buy carrots, you can buy big bags of organic carrots that are not very expensive, and you can put carrots in your soups. They're great for snacks. You can put them in your smoothies. And so it's just an easy way to get a really good quality product for not a lot of money that you can eat several times a day and get that orange color into your diet.
Can you recommend any special cookbook? I mean, for this, I still use my old Moosewood cookbook, but I'd love to have a cookbook for these kinds of recipes.
Oh, I have an old Moosewood cookbook too.
It's the greatest.
It is, there are lots of really good vegetarian vegan cookbooks. Off the top of my head, Forks Over Knives is a really good one. Mark Bittman, who's a really big a big personality in the food world, has several cookbooks. One of them is How to Cook Everything Vegetarian.
Yeah.
And in that one, he gives different options on how to make each thing. And then there's always Google, which is a great, just type in, what you're looking to make. I just can't, off the top of my head, I can't come up with other titles.
You put her on the spot.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. I mean, just.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
This is very helpful. It's just that it's harder. I find it harder to get recipes that people who are vegetarians and non-vegetarians can enjoy. And Moosewood is actually still an excellent source.
Yeah, she has great recipes. There's another cookbook that I love. I just remembered it's from the Candlelight Restaurant in the city. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but they have cookbooks which are terrific.
Okay.
I don't know if they're still in business after the pandemic, but I love their cookbooks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Daryl today? I see a lot of thank yous and great demos in here, and thanking you for a delightful escape. And of course, your daughter, Haley, for her camera skill. Awesome job.
Thanks.
We really can't thank you enough. Also, too, for those of you on, if you like this presentation and want to see more of it, please do send your feedback to my email, jqsu, that's J as in Jennifer, Q is in question, S is in Sam, U is in universe, at westchestergov.com. With that, I think we're going to close it. Colette, do you have any final words for us as we go back to this snowy day?
I guess I'll say bon appetit. Got it. Healthy eating. And thank you so much, Daryl. This was amazing.
Thank you,
it
Colette.
again.
Thank you both and Deb as well for inviting me to participate today.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great job. I want to taste right now.
Thank you.
All right, Mama.